Hello, welcome to our auto-generated system development guide. Today, you are going to learn how to create the services, controllers, and pages in this system. Now, before we continue, please remember to visit fairplaytube.bdicostarica.com, click the Buy Me a Coffee icon, and select a donation of your preference. This will help us keep the videos and products free for you. Let's start. So if we go to Visual Studio, you will see our solution for the auto-generated system, AGS for short. So in the auto-generated system, you will have a services project, a server project, client services project, and a client project. You will be working on all of them. Now, remember, since this uses source code generators and we have some pre-established logic, you need to follow some patterns and conventions that we have already established for the auto-generated or for the source code generators to be able to pick up the hints and create all of the partial classes and the code that needs to be created for the services, the controllers, the client services, and the UI, user interface. Okay, so here in my database project, I have this application user order. This application user order, basically the only things that it has is, okay, the primary key. Remember, the primary key needs to be named with the name of the table, suffix with the word ID. Now we have the application user ID, which is a foreign key to the application user ID in the application user table here. Then we have the order total and the order date. We don't want any of these to be nullable, so all of the data needs to be created. One other thing that we want to do is that if this is sent null, we want this date to be the database date in UTC. We want all of the data actually to be the database date, the database UTC date, to ensure or guarantee that all of the data is in the same time zone, let's say. Okay, once you have created that and you have your data access, right? The models, for example, once you have the model created using the EF Core Power Tools, you will be able to start working on these services. You will need to go and create a new class, which is going to be named in the following format. The name of the table suffixed with the word service. So for application user order, your service will be named application user order service. You need to declare it as a partial class and you need to mark it with service of entity and pass the values. So the entity name is going to be the name of the table. Remember to use the constants. You need to create a new constant under the entity names, right? And this constant, it will have the name of the table, right? And in order to reduce the hard-coded code, we use the name of the same um, variable instead of hard coding it. And then we pass the primary key type, which is a hint of the actual type for the primary key column in the model classes, right? And yeah, since database column was marked as big int, the corresponding type in C# is the type long. Okay, this service of entity and the constants are in these namespaces. The custom attributes has the service of entity, and the constants class is defined in the common namespace. Okay, so once you do that and you compile and everything, you will be able to see something like this. In your services, you go to dependencies analyzers, these service generators, auto-generated system service incremental generator, and you will have that there are a lot of files in here. Those are the auto-generated files. And in here we have the application user order service, and you see that this is the auto-generated code. This is a partial class, right? And it has the context, it has the constructor with the dependency injection, right? It has the create method, the get all method, the delete application user method, delete method, right? And the update method, as well as the get by ID. One other thing that we added in here is to the get and create, to the get methods, we added track entities parameter, so that if you use these methods manually from other place, so that if you use these auto-generated methods manually from other place, you can send the parameter if you want to track entities. So these auto-generated methods, the way they are implemented, are meant for the controllers to use directly to return the data. Therefore, there is no need to track the entities because there will be no modifications on that data, right? However, if you want to reuse this logic so you don't implement it, you can use it and mark it as track entities in case you want to modify it somewhere in some of your process, right? So if the track entities value is true, we return the application user order in this specific case with the as tracking. Otherwise, we return it with the as no tracking, right? Same for the get by ID, right? So if we track the entities, if the parameter is true, we do as tracking, and then we filter and return the singular default sync collation. And important, see that we are requiring a cancellation token in case you want to cancel the request. And in the delete, we are actually throwing an exception in case it doesn't find the entity. So delete, right? We are going to find the item in the database by its IID. We use the single or default async, right? If that returns null, then this is going to be null, and if it's null, we throw an exception. Otherwise, we continue the flow of removing the entity and saving the changes. So that's how you can create these services. Now, once you have your service implemented, you want to go to the server project controllers, and in here you want to create your class. In this case, for the application user order table, we are going to create a class application user order controller, and we mark it with the attribute controller of entity. And again, we pass the entity name and the primary key type, which is going to be long. And then you will see that for the application user order controller, the auto generator will create this class and see that it has things like it has um, the service, it has the auto mapper injected dependency, right? You see that they are in the constructor and they are assigned in here. And we have the endpoints defined in here. We have the create endpoint, right? And you see that basically what it does is it gets the model, it maps the create model to the data access model, right? And then it invokes the service create method and it passes the mapped entity and the cancellation token, and then it gets the result. The result basically maps the modified entity to um, the user visible model, right? To the get all, we return an array, and here we pass the track entities as false because we are only going to use this to return data, right? To the delete, we basically invoke the delete and return OK. If something fails, this method will throw an exception. In the update, we receive this application user model and we map it, and then we do the update and return the updated model, right? We map again from the data access model to the user visible model, and we have the get by ID 2, and the get by ID also has the track entities as false. So that is for the controllers. Now you need a way to easily invoke those endpoints. So you will have the client services. You create a class name. Remember, um, actually, this file name is wrong. Okay. Application user order client service. So basically, the name of the table suffix with client service. And here you will see application user order client service. And here is the client service. It uses the HTTP client service. It receives it uh, from dependency injection, right? It's an injected dependency, I'm sorry. And it has the create method. So you see it gets in this specific case, since this application does not yet have authorization, all of the methods are using the anonymous client. However, this HTTP client service eventually will have a create authorized client method, which will create the authorized HTTP client to pass the token to the server, and you will be able to do uh, calls to endpoints which require authorization. Okay, and we retrieve the data. We do this ensure success status code, so it throws an exception in case something wrong happened, and if there is success, we know that we can continue returning the data, right? Then we have the ones for the get all, we have the ones for the get application user by ID, right? And the one for the delete. And it seems, since we do not have yet the edit functionality in the user interface, this is not yet implemented in the client services either. Now, to create the pages are kind of a trick, taking advantage of C# source generators, but this is not the way source generators are implemented to be used, right? So source generators are meant to create classes in non-persistent code. What I mean is that they do not create like physical files. They just add code to the compilation. However, this was used to manually write these files in the disk in case you want to later modify it. Now, the way this specific item works is that you create this additional file, right? Name auto-generated pages.txt. You mark it with the build action C# analyzer additional file, and in here you add the actions. For now, we have only create and list, right? So it will indicate the source generator to create these two files. However, if you are going to modify this and you want to keep those changes, you need to delete this auto-generated pages file. Otherwise, the source generator will think that you want to keep those files processing, or otherwise the source generator will think that you want those files to be auto-generated and receive the modifications from the source generator. However, as I was saying, if you want to do manual changes in those files, you need to delete this file. The source generator logic will not execute for those files or for this entity, and you will be able to keep your manual modifications, right? So this can be used as a first pass or as an initial code generation for your entity user interface, and then you modify it as you want. Okay, now there are a couple of things that you need to do when you create um, new entities. You need to go to the constants file and you need to add several things. First, in the page routes class, you need to create another static class which will have the routes for your entity pages. So for the application user order, you will have a class name application user order suffixed with the word routes, and it needs to have two constants, two string constants, create and list, and you need to add the respective route. This is because when you open these pages, you will see that it uses the routes from the constants. The other thing that you need to do is in the entity names, as I was saying before, you need to add a new string, a new string constant, which is going to be the name of your entity or your table, right? And a couple of last things you need to do is in your server project, you need to register actually three things: the mappings, right, for AutoMapper. So from the create model to the data access model, from the entity model to the data access model, and from the data access model to the entity model, right? So this is for the create model, this is for the um, normal model, and this is to be able to map from the database model um, to the user visible model. Then you need to go to the startup.cs and you need to register your service, right? So services.addTransient, in this case, application user order service. And you need to do a similar thing in your client because you need to register your client service. So in here, you go to this program.cs and you write builder.services.addTransient application user client service. And if you want to have access to that page by some menu item, you can add it in the nav menu and add something like we are doing in here. You do a new link to the list page and it will be visible in the navigation bar. And that's pretty much it. After you compile, you will be able to see your changes. Thank you very much and have a great day. Please remember to visit fairplay2.pticostarica.com, click the Buy Me a Coffee icon, and select a donation of your preference. Take care.